So I wanted to start today's panel and just talk a little bit about IP, which we're about to get into. A lot of the themes that we've heard come up today, we all know it's very difficult to get films made. It just is. That's why we're here, is to try and help with some of those obstacles. And sometimes we all have brilliant stories to tell, and they're original, and they came from our head, and they're beautiful stories. But the one thing that we're noticing in the marketplace is that sometimes it's a little bit harder to get individual stories told. And one of the trends that we're seeing right now is to find stories that are based off of intellectual property. So our guest of panelists here have a ton of experience in IP, and I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Thomas Crowell. I'm an attorney and an IP law practitioner. I also teach copyright law and trademark law. So one of the things I'm going to be focusing some of my comments on today are some of the areas that you need to look for when you're evaluating IP to make sure it's actually as strong legally as you need it to be in order to bring it to a producer to get some funding.
Hi, my name is Aimee Schoof. I have a production company, Intrinsic Value Films, and we've made a number of movies based on books and stories. And then I have a comic book company called Red Giant Entertainment. That's all we do, is we create comic book properties to develop for film and TV.
Let me cross my legs like everyone else so I look professional. Give me a second.
I'm going against the grain.
Maverick.
Hi, everyone. My name is Creasia. I'm a literary manager and producer at Pathfinder Media, based in Los Angeles, California. On the IP side, our company specializes in, runs and operates the Robert E. Howard Library. That's everything from Conan the Barbarian to all of his other bigger titles. So that's some of the bigger stuff we do. But one of the other interesting things I've been doing for the last 2.5, 3 years with a lot of my writer-director clients is also creating IP to create new avenues for them to get to their film or TV ideas. Or if there's a project that it didn't work out and we weren't able to sell that script, but it's still a great property, how can we recreate it and redefine it to sell it into something else and maybe give it another shot? So that's what I can try to talk to you guys about and give you some knowledge on and some hope.
Hi, I'm Eric Williams from Zero Gravity Management. Just wanted to say I'm really excited to be here, and I really hope we can help you guys and accomplish all your film and TV goals. So I'm just thrilled to be up here. And so my company, kind of similar to Alex, management and production. I represent writers and directors. I built my business actually on original ideas and to getting movies and TV shows made on original properties. It's getting harder and harder to do that. So we've had to shift and focus more on intellectual property, and whether it's, like Alex said, creating it, or it's going out and trying to acquire the intellectual property and then writing your script or completing your film based on that property. So I represent a lot of novelists. I represent comic book writers, and also I go after true stories, life rights, all those type of things can be considered IP. And then I'd like to match my clients with that IP and then generate projects that way.
Excellent. Thank you guys. I think that the one thing that we're hoping and intending to do with everyone here today is to just continue to expand your mind for different ways to storytell. And this is really a great tip and a great tool to look at your project and see the viability if you can base it off of IP, if that makes sense. So we've already started to talk a little bit about IP, but I'd love to start this by actually clearly defining what IP is, and that is going to go to you.
Thank you.
Thomas.
All right, so IP stands for intellectual property in this context. If it was a tech company I was speaking to, I'd say it doesn't mean Internet Protocol. IP for this class is intellectual property. And periodically, I'm actually going to be calling on a colleague, the very esteemed Anthony Viera, who's in the back. Anthony, if you could just raise your hand here. Anthony is actually one of the people who's helped draft your laws on IP, and he knows a lot about Trinidad and Tobago IP. So I'm a U.S. attorney, and I could talk to you about what Hollywood expects and what the American producers expect, but there are going to be some key distinctions in your laws and our laws that hopefully Anthony can help us out and give some key distinctions so you can get a sense of it. So that being said, when we talk about intellectual property for filmmakers, we're talking about a couple of key areas. We're talking about copyright law. Copyright law protects works of expression, such as audiovisual works, which is what a film is, music and screenplays. Basically, if you can create it and reduce it to some tangible form of expression, even if that's on your hard drive, then you can potentially get a copyright in it. We're going to go into what copyright covers and doesn't cover in a lot of detail tomorrow during the legal track. But just know that copyright, oh, there's a little lizard joining us.
It's your in LA.
He didn't pay.
So,
He didn't pay. You gotta have him go.
So copyright law is going to be your main heavy-hitting body of law that you need to know. Trademark law governs things like logos and slogans and are basic, and it's protects the ability to distinguish your property, such as your film, to the consumer's audience. One of the things that Eric mentioned before is life rights. So I want to spend just a couple of moments going into this because there's a big misperception on this term. Life rights, when we talk about it, we talk a little bit about getting somebody's life rights. We're going to do a biopic for them. But under U.S. law, believe it or not, there's actually no such thing as a life right. What a life right is it's a collection of rights, and it's a collection of waivers. That is, your person who's signing is giving up the right to sue you for certain things. So under life rights, we typically have the right to use somebody's likeness in the U.S. and I believe in the U.K., and I don't know about Trinidad, but that would fall under a right of privacy law. You would also have the right to tell their story. And you would ask the person who's signing this, who's giving you their life right, to abandon the right to sue you for defamation. So it's there are other rights in there, but just globally speaking, it's a collection of things. It's not just one thing that you can turn to the law and say, this is what a life right is. The final thing I'm going to touch on, and I really want to stress this, and I'll stress it tomorrow, rights in ideas. So in other words, you guys might have a great idea for a film or TV show and you want to pitch it to somebody. How do you protect that before you've actually written it into a screenplay? And under U.S. law, and I believe under Trinidad and Tobago law, there's no copyright in an idea. So just, if you're going to only take away one thing about IP, you cannot protect your idea or your concept with a copyright. Tomorrow I can go into some ways to show you how under U.S. law it can be protected. But copyright, trademark, life rights, and the ideas that you can maybe protect are going to be the mainstay of the intellectual property rights you're going to be dealing with as a filmmaker.
All right, excellent. And one thing, the way I'd love to take this is to kind of go through the creative process. And again, as I mentioned, the panelists have had a ton of experience. So we're going to give you some examples of different types of intellectual property, and the hopes are to, maybe encourage your mind to think about a different way to tell a story that you do want to tell, and try and figure out a way to find an intellectual property that you could potentially option and go off of that. So one thing I wanted to start with is life rights. Well, to your point, not exactly life rights, but just for the purpose of this panel, we'll call it life rights. Let's say you guys have someone in your life that's just amazing. I mean, their life could be a movie. I'd love to talk to the panelists and get your perspectives. Like, how do you approach someone if you say, I would love to make a movie about your life? And any one of you guys could take that.
Yeah. Sure, I can go first. Because I work with a lot of clients that are writers and directors, and they, like Amanda was saying, come up with a really great idea, or they have a family member or a friend that they really want to base a TV show or a film off of. I mean, usually the best ways to first approach them is, one, have a strong idea, and then the next thing really is to be able to properly present that idea to the person, because they know that like their whole life and everything that's in their closet is somehow artistically, hopefully going to be put up on the big screen. So you want to make sure to really showcase that well, because it can get really delicate and tricky with emotions and thoughts, etc. And then next, comes up where I think Thomas has already said, and comes up even more, where you want to try to just right away try to get those life rights. It's so easy to keep tiptoeing around it, and then there's other ways too, that if you don't know this person, it's best to maybe try to team up yourself with somebody who has maybe a strong connection with that person or community, or a type of entity, company, that they have a little bit more power and weight that can help you get those rights, and they have the respect from however well they've done in their field, hopefully in film and TV.
And something that Thomas told me yesterday, I'm going to steal it from you, is that you think you might know somebody and say, I've got a great relationship with them, I don't really need a contract. That's when you especially need a contract.
Yeah.
It can go south real quick and ruin friendships. So I think always go out and be sure that there's no way around it. It's just, hey, this is what I need, and I want us both to be protected. So,
like, for example, I made a movie called Experimenter. It's about Stanley Milgram, so we partnered with his wife, who was still alive, and she, sort of in a way controlled the rights and had to sign off on her husband's work. They were together till the end, and it's a really sweet story. She actually wasn't with anyone else, and it's in the movie. So they still she allowed us to shoot in their apartment, and so it actually really does help in some ways. Not always will you get that sort of access, but if you enroll the family members or someone that's still alive involved in the film, if the person isn't still alive, it actually could be very helpful and challenging, because they will probably want to read the script, and they probably will want to give you some notes, and they probably will have some ideas about things. So, but oh my gosh, I've done 4 biopics, and so it can get a little tricky. Yeah.
So to that point, how do you approach, and what do the contracts look like for that?
I can take the second part first, and then I will leave you with the how to approach part. So the first thing, and I want to say, it's sort of implied in your question, but it's really important to bring it out there. The importance of having a written contract signed by the person. It's not just, good practice so you won't get sued, but it's also a critical piece in what we call the chain of title. That is the unbroken chain of ownership of your property. And so if you have a biopic and you're pitching it to a distributor, or you want it on TV, or you're trying to sell a TV series to somebody, those entities are going to require a life rights agreement 9 times out of 10. Obviously, if it's a dead historical figure, you don't have to worry about it. But if it's somebody who's alive or recently deceased who still has an estate who might bring suit, they're not going to touch you unless you can prove that up, or show that that you have a good connection but they won't sign the deal unless they actually have that.
Do you pay for that, or do you get it for free?
The life rights?
Yeah.
Oh, you absolutely pay. You pay. So what's in a life rights agreement? So you have a grant of rights. If I had the whiteboard here, basically a grant of rights on one side and a bunch of waivers. That is, a bunch of things that they're giving up the right to sue you for. So you have a right to tell their story. You have a right to recreate how they look. You have a right, in some cases, to combine 2 people to fictionalize them. And let's say it was 2 experimenters, Stanley Milgram and there was somebody else. And maybe for the sake of narration, it's better if you just combine it into one person. So you have the right to fictionalize them. And that's very often where it gets sticky, because especially if you have estates, people who are alive, they don't want the memory of their loved one to be sullied. And I've been a part of many deals where the fighting over who has approval over those issues. So if you're dealing with somebody who's a wonderful person and did something amazing, you want to tell their story, but their spouse wants them to be treated like a saint. But as a filmmaker, that going into the fact that they had a divorce, they had something on the side, makes a more dramatic narrative. You're going to get some pushback there. So one of the ways that you need to look at it is to carve out, if they won't do it without, try and get them to give up all approval. Let's start with that, right?
If they have approval, you never want that.
Right, you never want that. But if you have to give them approval or it won't go through, one of the things that I've done is I've been able to carve out, in other words, say, okay, I'm not going to give you approval, but I understand you don't want the affair, to be on screen. So if I can just agree that we're not going to mention the affair you have no approval, okay? And so you can sort of fall back to that. You have to have them give up the right to sue you for defamation or for slander. You have to have them give up the right to sue you for any copyright infringement if they've written their own biographies, the right to use their likeness, and potentially the right for their relatives to give up the right to sue you for mental distress or emotional damages as well. There are a bunch of others, but just to, I don't want to overload you, but that's generally what it is. And as far as the payment is concerned, I always try and advocate for a flat fee, but there's often a hybrid model where you'll pay them something up front because you're also paying for access. And that was a great point that you raised, is that you may understand their story, but unless you get the wife or the person who's closest to them to help you, to show you, okay, here's the photo album, okay, here's the bed where he did his best work. Unless you have that kind of access, it can be a much more sterile story. So you may want to discuss what's called contingent compensation, which is either a portion of the net profits or a box office bonus or deferred compensation. There are many different flavors that we'll go into tomorrow about just what that means.
Just to add to that.
Yes, please, Anthony.
So, life rights basically is getting the exclusive rights to portray, represent, or impersonate somebody in a film, all right? Now, if the life story is already in a script, you may probably need to get the rights from the owner of the script to adapt that script. So that's the first thing. Now, if you proceed to go about making a film about somebody, and it's quite clear that that's, even though you're using a different name, that's who you're talking about, you could find yourself at the receiving end of a claim for libel and defamation. And so it's very important to get that person to come on board and say, yes, you're okay to represent me, I approve the script, I give all of these waivers and permissions. Yes, money is usually part of the deal, but it doesn't only have to be money, as you pointed out. It could be non-financial incentives as well. Some people are quite happy to find themselves represented on screen. They just want to get credits, things of that nature. So.
Wonderful. And to your point on libel and slander, and I'm not sure if this is true in Trinidad, Anthony, but certainly the U.S. takes a very different position on libel and slander than England does. And it's the overview is that it's harder for somebody to make a successful libel claim in the U.S. than it is in the U.K. So is it similar in Trinidad?
Well, we are very much the English approach. And so in the United States, you have a lot more free speech and a lot more latitude about caricaturing and that kind of thing, particularly if you're a public figure. Not so here. So you want to be very careful about how you handle things that may be perceived as defamatory. But even in the United States, you've had issues with life rights. Remember Citizen Kane and Orson Welles and Randolph Hearst, the great publisher, felt that he was too badly represented, and he brought an action and blocked it. So it is something that you need to be mindful of, and you have to proceed carefully.
All right, definitely. So I want to move on, you guys, more to the property side of IP. So I'm sure you guys have, read the newspaper or picked up a magazine and found a really interesting article, and you're like, wow, this person's great, the story is great, wow, and it sticks with you. So can we talk a little bit about articles and optioning articles? And maybe Eric, I'll start with you on that one.
Sure. I love going after articles. I think it's just a very easy way and a very current way to go find things. We try and option articles all the time. There's different ways you can do it. You can go out and option an article, meaning you control it fully, or you get a shopping agreement where you have the exclusive ability to shop the article and you can make a deal at a later time. I think that for the people that I sell to all the time, they want to know that it's based on something very tangible that they can just read about and say, wow, that's really interesting, and yeah, let's make the movie off of this. And so articles, to me, are one of the most exciting ways to do it, just because it feels, again, very topical, usually if it's a current event or something, and you're also not asking people to read a 300-page book, and because you can get it across pretty quickly. I think the The way I've had success of going after articles is, you as an individual contact the writer of or the journalist, and we can talk about the legal side of things. That sometimes a publication owns the rights to that article. Sometimes a journalist, if it's freelance, they own the rights to the article. So it kind of depends, kind of who retains the rights to it. But I find if you reach out to them and kind of make a plea and say, here's who I am. Here's my idea of why I think that you should give this to me, the movie or TV show that I want to make, and you really make a real passionate, personal plea to them. I've had a lot of success of getting rights and getting articles that way, instead of contacting a company like myself and we go after them and say, hey, we want to do this, and they just start seeing dollar signs. Well, how much are you going to pay me? And so, but if it's artist to artist, I always find that's the best way to go after these things, and a lot of times you can get them for free. And again, they won't give them to you forever, but they'll give them to you for a specific period of time. But I love chasing down articles and going after them.
Yeah, and a fun way that is completely easy, you can do it like from your computer, honestly, is using your social media. I mean, I think a lot, at least if they're freelance writers and we find an article, I'd say the last 6 articles that I've gotten for clients, or I've told them to reach out, they've used Facebook Messenger, Twitter a lot. Most journalists are actively on their DMs on Twitter. Or also, like, if you just go to their whatever page of publication that they post most of their articles on, you'll just find their email right there too. So finding contact info for especially journalists, sometimes authors, is very, I wouldn't say easy, but it's pretty accessible. I think you're on.
Sorry, I was holding it last time. Yeah, I was just going to say too, because we always are looking for cool articles, and like my partner found something that was like super hot, like it seemed like hot. So I would be aggressive too. Like if you find something cool, don't be like, oh, I'm going to wait and think about that till next week, because there's all the Hollywood people like always looking for that stuff too. So if you see something hot, just like call, like try to just go and like as you're calling, like get your pitch ready. But
yeah,
I mean,
I've got 4 assistants at all time out there looking for this stuff.
Yeah,
So as soon as it comes out, so if you find something you love, be aggressive.
Yeah, be aggressive in it. Like don't just be like, oh, I'm going to get to that because I have to come up with my pitch idea and all that stuff. So I'm saying just like make the call and then come up with the pitch as they're like on hold or whatever. Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys know this. Have you guys seen the movie Tag with Jeremy Renner? Mm-hmm. Anybody? So Tag is actually based off of I believe it was a New York Times article. It was literally just an article about a bunch of guys who play tag and meet together every year. So someone found that to be a fascinating idea, optioned the script, or optioned the article, and then ultimately became a movie.
Yeah,
so
fun fact, it became a really hot property around town, that article. It went around, they were looking for screenwriters. I actually had a client that was very much in the mix to write that project, and so what they did is they went out to management companies like my company, agencies, and we were saying, we want your top screenwriters and have them come up with a take. And this happened in about 3 days. They went out to us. We had to have our writers come up with a take. They heard takes and then immediately went into the studio, and it sold within a week. So it's just it can be a very fast, very fun process. But it was all based on that article, yeah.
Just go back to biopics as well and life rights. Another thing with the articles that I've been doing is sometimes it's best to like try to find an article, because a lot of times either if they're a big figure, getting that book is just really difficult. But if you find a small article, that might be your first gateway into getting those life rights and getting a bigger company to help you out as well if need be.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I went after something recently, and I wanted to get the IP. The person is passed, and I thought, okay, I could just make it because she's passed long enough that I could just do a movie about her, but I was like, I want to go get a book, right? So I went after, there's 4 books about her, and I went after all of them at the same time because you just have to be aggressive with this stuff. And everyone wanted to make their own story of her. 3 out of the 4 authors wanted to do their own stories, and I was like, well, let's partner, And so it's really interesting, but I ended up getting 1. So, but you do that. It's a really interesting thing on that level. It's just if there's an opportunity to get IP on something, whether it's a book or an article, there's a lot of ways of going about it.
And we've also been talking about articles generating IP for biopics and TV shows. But one of the things that it's also used for is for what we call unscripted television, right? So reality TV, as it's more commonly known. So if you see a show that centers around a family, let's say like bounty hunter shows, or people who have an interesting business, like make cakes or pastries in a certain place, those shows have almost always been put together by a producer who's approached the business in question, or the person in question, the family in question, and has gotten the life rights or a certain kind of rights to use their business and depict their business in a deal that looks somewhat similar to a life rights deal. So it's not just constrained to biopics, but reality TV also uses it as a vehicle.
Yeah, and actually I can speak to that because I just sold a TV show based on this exact concept.
Great.
So
I didn't know that.
I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but I'm glad you brought it up. So, when you're in your day-to-day, you're looking on your phone, and I found a social media influencer who was a very specific person in her business based in Dallas, Texas. And she created her own line of hair extensions that she called mermaid extensions. So she created this entire world that was fascinating. She made mermaids. She didn't have a salon. She had a sea-lawn, like SEA lawn. You didn't take selfies there. You took shelfies. She created this whole magical, Candyland world around mermaid. And I was like, she's fascinating. And she's a social media influencer, so she's constantly showing her videos every single day. And I go, she would make great TV. So what I did is I approached her, and I put together a talent agreement with her. And we went out and we went out with the shopping agreement, where then I found a production partner, 3Ball Entertainment, who I partnered with to handle the actual physical production. So we went out with this concept, and we pitched it all around town. And I brought on a partner that is in the unscripted space. So if you guys find an idea and you may not have the resources, try and find a partner that can help you do that. So we pitched it, and ultimately it was sold to the E! Channel. So it's really finding things in places that are in your day-to-day life that you might not have thought of that could ultimately become a property. So.
And because you did that, and because you had a shopping agreement, and you had a talent agreement with her, that means that no other producer could go to that mermaid person and swoop it out from under you, because you had a holding deal or whatever kind of deal you had. So again, the importance of written agreements to allow you to propertize that IP.
The agreements are key, because after we had signed on the dotted line, she actually was approached by 4 other producers. But I had 18 months with her to be able to try and put this thing together. So I had to work my ass off to make it work, but I knew I had 18 months and the clock was ticking, so definitely. Right before that, though, we had started to talk a little bit about books. So can we open up the discussion about, maybe finding a book and what happens in terms of IP there?
Sure. All right. I actually represent a lot of books, a lot of authors in all spaces, all genres. And it's just, people love the idea of basing something off of a book. And, whether it's, makes it better or worse, it doesn't really matter. It's just, if it's based on a book, you'll find more people interested in investing into your project. It's just kind of the reality, right? I mean, and trust me, I love coming up with original ideas and doing original things, but it's just easier if you have that. And so, it's interesting because book you have 300 pages to get a project across, and in a script you have 100, right? And so adapting a book is actually a pretty difficult process. And I think the most important thing is to convey to the author what your vision for that book is, right? Because it's not going to be exactly what the book is. It's just not. You don't have enough time in a movie because usually books are much longer. So I think it's really, really important if you find a book that you love, to show a lot of passion and enthusiasm, but have a very, very clear idea of what the movie or TV show is going to be, and try and convey that to the author, and hopefully get them on board with your vision for it. I find that's always the most successful, is if you just show a lot of enthusiasm and passion for something, but your vision is very, very clear. I would not approach an author if you say, I loved your book and I'd love to option it, and that's all you have. Really show them what your vision for it is. And so The one thing about optioning books and kind of any IP, of course, is that you have only a short period of time that you own or control. You never really own it, but you control that piece of material. Options can be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, whatever you can negotiate. But the fact is, it's going to be a limited time frame. So you really want to make sure that you do have a vision for something that you can get working on right away, because that option eventually will run out. And as we all know, how long sometimes it takes to get a movie going, a TV show going, it sometimes just takes a lot of time. So that's what I would say is go with a lot of passion and enthusiasm, but have a very clear vision for what it is and get started right away. Yeah.
It's okay. I'll make it really short because I think I'll have to speak with you pretty soon. For people who follow me on social media, I'm a composer, by the way. My name is Navi Lancaster. I'm a film composer, right? But I also do podcasts and audio editing and so forth, right? A friend of mine, he's a Trinidadian who lives in the States. His name is he lives in LA, actually. His name is Anthony Fills. Now you're talking about books. He has written, we put out 3 books already called the Night Trilogy, right? The books are right now on Kindle and all these other digital distributions. I'm on the audio side, so I create all the podcasts. We created the fake radio station which we hired DJs from Eastern Europe to play, right? A radio station called Chaos Radio, right? And a few other things in this whole world of Tony Knight. Now, the nice thing about this is a series of 9 books. Think of like Star Wars.
And they're all done? 9.
5 of them are done.
Okay. Wow.
Right? 3 of them are already out. 2 of them are about to be out. And we created 2 side books. One is for North Korea and one is for Nassau, right? Nassau, Bahamas. So those things are already in circulation. Plus, we also created, well, he is the designer. He's a world-class designer. Did stuff for National Geographic, so on and so forth. But we already have the website. We already have the ancillary website to go to from the main canon. Everything else done is basically 2 of us. We've been working on this for, about a year and a half, putting all these products, right? Now, in my mind, what you're telling me, he was talking about film for a while, and we didn't quite have the opportunity. And now you're talking about this, and in my mind, I'm saying, call this guy now, but I don't want to get up and call this guy right now, right? So I would want to speak with you and put you in contact with him, because it's his idea. I'm just the audio guy in the whole chain. Right? But it is his baby. Right? We went through the whole gamut. We did interviews in LA. I arranged interviews with him here, so our articles in papers, that kind of stuff, so people know our stuff. Right? So, but my mind and my heart is telling me you're the guy that we need to speak to.
And I'm sorry, Anthony, did you have a comment that you want to weigh in on something?
Yeah, I'd like to say something about books. So it's important to get the adaptation rights, because, of course, when you have a book, there's copyright in the book. And if you are going to be interfering or adapting the book into film, that's an adaptation that you do need to get express permission for. But it's not just a copyright issue. In our law, we have something called moral rights,
which we don't have in the U.S.
And so you really don't want to drop the ball. You want to also get the rights, the moral rights waived, because without that, moral rights are not just about paternity, but it's about the integrity of the work. So any attempt to change the work or to distort the work without consent can be problematic unless you have those moral rights waived.
Right. And I just wanted to add, first of all, kudos to you for doing all that work, because, I mean, that's to create that world and create all those properties, you are just putting yourself in a really great position to potentially sell, the film and TV rights.
Stay connected.
What's that?
No, go ahead.
So, but because you have so many, what a lot of people in LA look for, especially on the film side, is a franchise. I mean, everyone says, I want a franchise starter. Obviously the other, anything else can be considered like a one-off, but something that's a franchise, which you might have, obviously I don't know much about it, but you might have, given if you're able to have 9 books on something, that to me says that could be a franchise, and every studio wants their franchise starters, right? And so I think that's really great that all that work is put in, but also with with so much TV, if you've got, not 9 books, I mean, that could also be a series as well, right?
Yeah, and one final point on this, if I may, and yes to everything Anthony said, and we'll explore ways of sort of getting to a contract tomorrow. And the final point is this, is we can talk about whether or not this should be protected, whether it is protected, the story of your friends, but if you have this wonderful screenplay and then you're pitching to a studio, or if you're trying to get what's called errors and omissions insurance, which is insurance that protects you against intellectual property lawsuits, those entities are going to require life rights. So even if you say to them, well, I shouldn't need it, it's a factual-based story, there's nothing defamatory in here, and you could be right on that, but studios and television networks are very risk adverse, and I've gone to the mat with them. I represent production companies, who are doing material like this on TV, and I've gone to the mat with their attorneys and had many conversations where they say, no, I get it, Thomas, you're absolutely right, and you're right to cite that case, but we don't care. And so just know that's
you
sort of,
your movie.
yeah, if they need that. They need to have that. So it may be, you need that contract, that life rights contract, even though, if you were sued in court, you may prevail. The better practice may be to get the life rights.
There is a few little loopholes in there. I did it on a project where the one man that I made the story passed and the other one was in jail. And there you can do inspired by true events. There's like certain words you can do in the beginning of the movie, and we had to be really specific on what that is because it was based on the story, but we couldn't get anything in writing from anybody, and so we did that. So there's interesting ways of going about this, and I almost got in trouble on another movie too, where we actually made the movie and then realized, oh my God, we have to get something in writing from this person, and the state gave us a really hard time, and we were about to premiere in Sundance, and it was like, holy moly, and so we had to use certain words in the front, similarly. So.
Yeah, I mean, I always even say, this is a little bit before contracts, or if it's not fully needed for a contract, to just tell the client or I will, I'm like, just make sure it's an email too. See email chains of verbiage going back and forth, hey, thanks for after we had this coffee conversation that you're gonna let me really expose your true story, how you guys met. I just think it's so great, and I'm so thankful that you're okay with me doing this. If they just reply back sure, can't wait to see it. It's not a lot, but it's a good starting way to get into it. And sometimes you don't need to go as far to getting a lawyer and having contracts if it's just based on inspired by a story I heard from a friend. You say it in each way.
Because under U.S. law, what Alex just said may be a contract,
So don't fully use that.
Right, but it's not clearly a contract, which is why it's better to have a contract. But I might be able to argue that a collection that there was a meeting of the minds and all the fundamental aspects of what should form that contract.
And just be careful there. I've actually been sued before because someone made an offer on a deal, and my colleague actually responded back, "Thank you," and not agreeing to anything. But they took the position in court. They said, "Oh, you said thank you. That's an agreement of the deal." And we're like, no. We said thank you for sending an email, sending your offer, but we had to discuss it. We got sued, and it went deep into court, and we spent a lot of money fighting it, and then they threw it out. But we didn't get our money back. So very careful.
Let me weigh in, and then I want to toss to Anthony. You had a comment on that too?
Yeah. While we talked earlier about how assignments of rights have to be in writing, that's because the law specifically requires it. So for transfers of real property or copyright. But contracts, we're getting into a whole different sphere. Under our law, a contract just needs to have certain elements like consideration, intent to create legal relations. So you can be in a contract with just an oral discussion, a handshake agreement. You can be in a contract based on performance. And so you have to be very careful what you're saying, because if the other party is under the impression that you have a deal and is acting on it, you can find yourself for breach of contract or something known as a promissory estoppel. That's something that we could go into again. But again, when you're dealing with people, be very careful what you represent, what you hold out, what you may think that you were just giving a general discussion. They may take it that there actually was an agreement, offer acceptance, and you're bound.
In my signature line, whenever I negotiate on behalf of clients, I have a language which says that nothing in this email is intended to create a contract on behalf of myself or my clients. Only a separate signed writing between the parties can create a contractual obligation, or something like that. But the point being is that it's right there. This is not a contract. It is merely a negotiation because, yes, I mean, I can cite a number of cases that have happened time and time again with that because we do have that, you can construe email chains as a contract. Yes. Oh, sorry.
I have a, sorry, my name is Jason. I have an animation production studio. Hello? Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a sort of non-legal IP question, more around the areas that I think you mentioned, maybe you to some extent. But when you talk about, searching for IP or looking for opportunities, other opportunities for IP, has there been, or is there a model where IP, like for example, you talk about the podcast, right? Bringing a podcast back and put a new spin on it. Are there scenarios or models where a podcast, that same podcast concept or a comic concept, but it's not yet been created? So you're creating that IP with the intention of developing it into that brand with the view that down the road somebody will pick it up for whether it be a series or movie or whatever avenue it is.
Yeah,
Are there people that do that, and is there I guess what I'm trying to understand is there a model to fund that? Because the exploitation of the IP in its original form may not have a sustainable business side, but with the longer play of selling, that's where the thing is. There a model for that?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I kind of look at it, is that I don't, part of my business is not going after podcasts, not going after these things because, I think it's a little harder to make money off of those. And so I actually don't see that as a business. I look at all those stuff as taking it and turning that into a traditional TV show or movie, right?
Exactly.
And so I think it's the nice thing about podcasts is that they're so cheap. You can just go make one, and you don't need to go get a bunch of money to go make one. You can go, with some good headphones and a mic, you can do it in a little studio, and it's pretty easy. And so my intention when I get something, say you came to me and said, hey, I want to turn this into a movie or a TV show. Here's what I have. I've written a script, I've got a podcast, and I have a presentation of some visuals of this. You didn't just come to me with a script, and I get so many scripts a week, right? You have all this other work, and I look at the whole package of work and say, wow, actually, this is really cool. I see the visuals, I can listen to the podcast and read the script. There's so much more incentive for me to say, I want to get involved in that and then help you turn that into a more traditional movie or TV show. So where I think the beginning of your question was, is there a source of funding for that? I would say probably not. I would say you probably have to go and do that unless you guys have other examples. But for me, I look for people that have had this stuff that's already kind of completed. But then I'm going to help you and figure out how do we go and go get the big money to go make that into a more traditional outlet.
Yeah. Again, you still have to get it funded yourself. But one of the things that I'll sell a lot of times to people, and I'm trying to incentivize more so companies to get more into the podcast regions. I say, like, hey, how much did you pay for that podcast? Or how hard was it for you to go in that bidding? Even though you found some really cool rights. I'm like, well, like 6 hours of content on TV costs, let's say, X amount of money. 6 hours of content on a podcast only costs a fraction of that. So that's a great selling tool to at least start off with when negotiating and trying to pitch your idea. But to go back into a little bit more starting steps for how do I get it financed? If I have an idea, like I still have to pay a sound engineer or something like that. One, there's a couple ways. One, you can you can use all your resources and really try to treat it like making a short film or an indie film. Whenever you're doing that indie or short, you're getting a lot of favors, and we all know that. So talking to like maybe not the best sound engineer, but like, hey, who's like your mentee or like your assistant that can help me out with this idea? Who are some people in like the theater area that like I can get and can do my script and play it out? And then once you have that, then there's lots of ways to getting it distributed, and there's a lot of ways online that'll tell you how to distribute your podcast. It's almost very close to like how to distribute your songs or your audio book nowadays too, whether it's iTunes, Audible Free, a lot of other outlets as well. And then from there, once it gets to sponsorship and it could become something bigger, I mean that's at a point when people will probably reach out to you that are bigger networks as well. But again, to finish that up, when doing that, if you have a longer goal of turning it into a series or bigger, maybe franchise movie or just movie, it's great. It's an amazing proof of concept to use because it really shows a lot.
I don't know if you guys know that term, but proof of concept essentially is, here I'm going to do a podcast of exactly what the concept of my movie or show is going to be. Same thing with if you go and shoot a little short film. I think that this is on topic but slightly off is, if you're going to make a short film, make it about the larger thing that you want to make, right? Don't just do a one-off short film, make a short film that's about the feature that you want to also then go direct. So you have a proof of concept. And so same thing with that podcast, your proof of concept is, I'm going to talk about what this is, for the larger version of it. But again, I always talk about build a story around yourself. Have as much material to get to someone like me as possible. If you have to self-publish a book, you don't have the sales numbers, but you know what? Just having the visuals where I can look at it and go, oh, you know what? They self-published this. Yeah, no one read it, no one saw it, but you know what? I can see it. I can see the visuals. I can see your vision, and I've got a podcast, and I've got these, a PDF presentation of a lot of pictures or whatnot, where it just helps me kind of visualize and focus on this. Again, we get so many scripts, and if you just have a script, it's really hard to set yourself apart from everybody else, because everybody has a script. My dad has written a script; it was terrible. So it's like, but he didn't have the podcast, he didn't have the, to have all that stuff, that's how you kind of get our attention and say, okay, well now I want to help you with your podcast, and go and make the TV show.
Before we get into it too, if I may, with podcasts, has anyone listened to like scripted podcasts in the last couple years?
Yeah.
Anything fun?
Yeah.
They're so fun.
Here's one I think if you're able to watch it, that's really good. But Homecoming, that's a really great one that comes first off of mine. That did really well.
And if you're creating these with other people, make sure you have written contracts so that's clear, who owns what.
That's funny.
And I know Anthony had a comment too.
Yeah, so can I just say something about IP? Because I think that this is fundamental. So, first point I want to really emphasize is that we are talking about property. It's property that comes out of the human intellect, it's creative, but at the end of the day, it's property. It's just as valuable as land or your motor car or whatever you may own. And I want to suggest that in many respects, it's even more valuable. So for example, if you look at KFC down in Westmoreland, and there was to be a fire, what is the real value of KFC? Was it the cookers that went on fire, or the counters, or the chicken they had there? It's the brand. It's the know-how. When you look at a film, there's a basket of IP rights in that film. We haven't talked about trademarks, but the trademarks of Paramount, Universal, Columbia are valuable property assets, right? So we look at that. You have Film TT there, Creative TT, Export TT. I wonder how many of those are actually trademarked. That trademark, that brand, carries an association with quality and consistency of product. It has value. So when you're doing your film, it's not just copyright in the script, but it's the brand. You get your trademark for the film. When you think about the rich today, wealth is no longer in manufacturing, and it's all in information and IP. It's Gates and Jobs and Rowling. So do not discount the value of intellectual property. And we're not talking about copyright only. There's a whole gamut of rights: copyright, patents, industrial designs, trade secrets, trademarks. And so when you design how to protect your film, because it's not just about acquiring rights, but how to enforce them and to exploit them, you want to do a portfolio of all of these various IP rights in your film. And so that's a whole different discussion as to how to create that portfolio, how to ring fence it, how to exploit it.
Anthony's 100% right, and that's our intention, is to give you the tools, to give you the best possibility to succeed. So I know we're past time, so I do want to wrap things up. One last thing, we've been giving out resources to everybody that they can kind of reach out to when it comes to IP. So do you guys maybe mind sharing some resources?
Sure. All right. I'm going to be shamelessly self-promotional here. All right. I wrote a book called The Pocket Lawyer for Filmmakers, which I am told is on the desk of many Hollywood attorneys and studios. So that's my first. I'll be continuing to be shamelessly self-promotional. The Pocket Lawyer for Comic Book Creators, which is the very first legal guide to the comic book industry, thank you very much, is also available on Amazon.com. But now to veer away just my own shameless self-promotion here for a moment. The Hollywood Reporter Esquire. All right, so read the trades. The Hollywood Reporter Esquire is a wonderful distillation of all of the legal issues that are in Hollywood on a day-to-day basis, and all of the IP lawsuits, all of the contract lawsuits. So it will give you a very good sense of not just what's protectable, what isn't, but also the likelihood of people suing and for why.
Okay. I think, well, one place where I go to find stuff is old bookstores. And I particularly like sci-fi and fantasy. And so I just love going through these books that maybe were once really popular, but the option is expired or something like that. So I go and look there, and that's actually where I found one of my properties that I'm about to make, which is super cool. And it happened to be like a 27-time Hugo Award-winning book, but I didn't know. I knew once I looked it up. But that's a cool place. And then also, of course, I'm going to promote comic books because I love comics. So go to comic book conventions and go to the Artist Alley. Don't go to the Marvel Alley. I mean, you can, but you're not going to get those. So go to the Artist Alley. It's where the up-and-coming artists are. And these people are so excited that you're just there reading their books anyway. And if you really, really love something and come up with an idea, befriend with the person. And then you basically have your storybook artist there for your property. So it's like you're killing two birds with one stone. So you could actually develop a cool property based on there, and you have your artwork created. So for producers like me, I love that. I like pictures. Like Eric was saying, like I get so many just scripts with like nothing attached. And frankly, I actually don't read a lot of them because I just have too much. I like things with them. I like accompanying materials. And so that's a really kind of easy way of doing it. Like create the materials and then write the story with them. And then you've got also a great collaborator with somebody that's maybe a little further along the business or also knows people. As I was talking about in the last panel, it's all about relationships and collaboration.
And another thing too that's really great is that there's a great website, and I think it's even an app too, called Goodreads. And a lot of times when I'm like, oh man, I really want to find a new like sci-fi book that I want to sell, or I would want to base it off of this X type of thing, I'll go in like the known book. Like I'll start off at Star Wars, and then I'll say related titles, and I'll just keep taking a deeper and deeper dive till still maybe I find something that's good, and I think that the writing's good too, and it has maybe a little bit of traction. And that's a great way to start your deep dive. Start at something that's known, and then you'll be surprised how many things online become related topics or pieces of IP as well. And then as far as the podcast side, I usually once a month, or especially once every 6 months at least, I just go in the New York Times, and the LA Times is really good too, and I just say, top favorite scripted or just podcasts. And then also on iTunes as well. If you just go on like top podcasts, they'll pop up. A lot of them are unscripted, but there are ways to do filter searches for just scripted, and that's a good way to just start off and start hearing more of these and getting the idea of how it works to build a podcast by listening to them. And then as far as comic books too, I mean, I try to go to all the fun conventions as well and go to the artist alley, but sometimes, I just don't have time to go to the New York Comic Con as much as I want to. So I'll just go online and I'll see all of the vendors that are there, and I'll just start making searches of like, who are vendors I've never heard of before. And then I'll start looking at their titles, and if especially they're indie, newer vendors, and then I find their website, then it makes it's a little bit easier for me to get to them as well.
And what we do a lot, there's a lot of publishers, especially out of New York, and so I just kind of look at the publishing houses in New York, and almost all of them on their website, they have their weekly or a lot of times their monthly what's new for us type of newsletter that goes out, and it's always on their websites, and so we check those all the time. If it's a pretty well-known house, you probably won't get the biggest titles, but just look at some of the ones that maybe fly a little bit under the radar, because as they want you to, they want that exposure. They want it to turn into a movie, because guess what? Then they'll sell more books. So we do that a lot. And then I'm going to say something that sounds so obvious and stupid, but please bear with me. The internet, okay? So we do this all the time, and what you do is you be very specific to what you're passionate about, and what specific to what you want to make movies about, right? And so if you say, I love true crime based on family stuff, Google true crime family. I guarantee you're going to find some pretty interesting stuff. Just do deep dives. But I would just say just be very specific to your passion and what you want. And my company, we kind of have a reputation for doing kind of crime drama. We make a show called Ozark that,
great show. I like this show.
Shameless self-promotion. We have 14 Emmy nominations, and last summer was the most streamed show in the world.
It's good.
So I made that show. We're about to go into the third season. And so
Not soon enough.
Yeah, there you go. All right, I'll stop now. But yeah, it's something that we do. So it's okay, true crime family, and you find a lot of stuff. Go find an article, and it's that easy. Just do the deep dive, find the article. You'll find some really cool stuff. And honestly, I would spend a lot of time there. We have a lot of people spending a lot of time just on the internet. So when it sounds like, well, we cover the internet, that sounds ridiculous. But if you're very specific to what you do and what you like, you'll find something.
And of course, on the internet, stage32.com.
Yeah. Yeah, don't you guys have like a round table thing that a lot of people jump on and talk about what they're doing?
Yeah, actually, we do. That's so funny. I was going to bring that up.
Perfect.
So Stage 32, if you're not a member, by the end of this week, obviously, make sure you sign up. It's free. All of this is free. One of the things we do every month, on the third weekend of the month, we do Introduce Yourself Weekend. And so we have literally hundreds of thousands of people from around the world that introduce themselves in the Introduce Yourself Lounge. And so you'll meet people from all over. We were talking about co-productions earlier. You might meet someone from Brazil. You might meet someone from France that you can start up a relationship and discuss your ideas. And then a lot of people who do have property are in Introduce Yourself Weekend. So people are like, hey, I wrote these books. Hey, I wrote this, or I host this podcast. So you can always find such creative people. I mean, it's literally a network of creative people. So that was one of my resources. And then another resource that I have is called Publishers Marketplace. And it's a paid website. It's $25 a month. I don't have a TT conversion here, but we'll stay in US dollars. Okay, so Publishers Marketplace actually shows all of the book deals that are happening, what's been acquired, what's going on the market, and it's updated in real time.
And I'm on that as well, and it's, you can filter it in really nice ways to, again, search after what you like and what you want. It's good. It's a really good resource. Yeah. And I would say, pay the money. It's just sometimes, your competition is, so, if you want to compete, sometimes you got to just, do what they're doing as well, so.
Yeah. Perfect. All right, guys, I know we've kept you far too long. I think today we've all realized that this is show business. We're here to talk about this as a business. And, all of us up here, we make a living doing this. This is how we support ourselves. And, we're trying to share as much knowledge that we have, to share with you, to be able to make this a career for you, not just here locally in Trinidad and Tobago, but all over the world. So, feel free to ask us questions. We're obviously going to be around the rest of the week. So, thank you guys today, and a big thank you to Nika and Film
Anthony.
TT for having us. And oh my gosh, and to Anthony, I really appreciate all of your insight.